Hello, fellow crafters! Welcome to Home Buddy. Recently, I've been spending a lot more time in the kitchen, and one of my favorite things to make is pot stickers from scratch. I know a great recipe for pork and shrimp pot stickers by Thai Tran that I'll link in the description below, but I'm unfortunately short on several key ingredients, and I don't really want to go to the grocery store because of the whole pandemic thing going on. Fortunately, dumplings are one of those magical dishes that you can pretty much adapt to any protein. So with that in mind, today I'm going to show you how to make dumplings using whatever bits and bobs you happen to have on hand. The original recipe calls for 2 cups of Napa cabbage to be finely chopped, but I don't have that at the moment. What I do have is a pack of coleslaw mix I keep in the fridge for salads. So I dump about 2 cups of it onto my chopping board and start slicing. I want it to be very finely chopped. Once that's ready, I mix it in a bowl along with 2 teaspoons of salt and set it aside for about 30 minutes to draw out any excess moisture. As I mentioned before, I am currently out of shrimp and pork entirely, but I do have some possible substitutions. Namely, this half-empty package of ground chicken and some leftover firm tofu I have. The ground chicken will be fine as is, but the tofu will need a little extra bit of love before it can join the rest of the party. Wrap it in a large dish towel and make a plate sandwich. Then place something heavy on top. Set it aside for at least 20 minutes to allow gravity to do its work. In the meantime, I'll prep the rest of the veggies. I minced 5 cloves of garlic into an almost paste-like consistency and placed it in a bowl. Then I peeled about an inch of fresh ginger and grated it using my favorite microplane before adding it to the mix. I finely sliced 4 scallions and added 3/4 of it to the filling before setting aside the last fourth for later use. A couple turns of black pepper later and I'm ready to add in the chicken. Being careful to disperse it across the entire mix. I also add about a 1/4 cup of grated carrots I had left over from a batch of carrot cake I'd made the day before. You can use all sorts of raw vegetables in your dumpling filling. Just make sure they are finely sliced and don't bring in a ton of moisture. I can then unwrap my tofu from its makeshift prison and crumble it in with the rest of the filling. Remember that bowl of salted cabbage I set aside earlier? Well, it's been 30 minutes, which means that this cabbage is ready for squeezing. Just dump everything out onto a clean kitchen towel and go to town, wringing out any excess moisture that would make your dumplings soggy. Discard the liquid and dump your freshly squeezed cabbage in with the rest of the filling. For seasoning, I'm following the original recipe fairly closely. I don't have any Chinese rice wine, but I do have mirin, which is a Japanese rice wine that is a little bit sweeter, so I'll throw a tablespoon of that in, along with a tablespoon of rice vinegar, and hopefully those 2 forces will balance each other out. I'm also adding 1 tablespoon soy sauce and 2 teaspoons of toasted sesame oil. I'm going to leave out the ½ teaspoon of granulated sugar the original recipe calls for, because I think the carrots I added in earlier will give it enough sweetness already. With that done, I can cover the filling with plastic wrap and store it in the fridge for at least 20 minutes. When you're making pot stickers, you can always use store-bought wrappers, but I actually find making the dough for the dumplings to be quite a soothing activity, so if you do have the extra time, I recommend you try it. I measure out 2 cups flour into a small bowl and create a well in the center, which I pour ½ cup plus 1 tablespoon of water inside. Then I slowly incorporate the flour into the center of the well to create a shaggy dough, which I can then turn out onto a clean work surface. And then I knead, and knead, and keep kneading, until when I press my finger against the dough, it springs back up. Then I separate my ball of dough into 2 logs, cover them with a damp paper towel, and let them rest at room temperature for 30 minutes. After that, I can begin shaping my wrappers. The original technique calls for cutting off pieces of the dough before flattening them into shape with a tiny rolling pin. However, my only rolling pin is sized regular, so I have to get a little creative with my shaping. I like to roll out a sheet of dough, cut out little circles from it, and then individually shape the circles using my hands and gravity. Essentially, I'm trying to thin the sides of the wrapper but leave the center relatively untouched. This will help with the stability of the dumpling. I also like to dust my wrappers with cornstarch as I stack them to keep them from sticking to one another. Then I just keep rolling and shaping discs until all my dough is gone. Then I cover my newly made pot sticker wrappers with a layer of cling film so they don't dry out while I work. When it comes to actually forming the dumplings, I like to work in batches of about 4 at a time. I like to place a little over a teaspoon of filling into the center of each round before wetting the edge with water and crimping everything in place. You want it to kind of resemble the shape of a half moon, so you're only going to crimp one side of the dumpling wrapper. Once they're formed, you can either immediately cook them or freeze them for a later date. Even if you only want to wait a few hours before cooking them, I still recommend storing your dumplings in the freezer, since storing them in the fridge will just leave you with a dumpling-shaped puddle. To cook the pot stickers, I turn my stove flame to medium and heat up around 2 tablespoons of canola oil in a large nonstick pan. I also grab my splatter screen and pan lid out from storage. Make sure to turn your stove fan on to avoid triggering the smoke alarm. Or choose to live dangerously. Once the oil is good and hot, I can begin placing the pot stickers into the pan, crimp side up. When they're all in, cover them with your splatter guard and leave it alone for 2 minutes so the pot stickers' bottoms can get golden crispy. After that, just pour in half a cup of water and quickly cover the pan with a lid. Set a timer for 3 minutes and let your dumplings steam away. While that's happening, I'll make a quick dipping sauce. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it is that you have to try making your own dipping sauce. Even if you're just using frozen dumplings from Trader Joe's, it's so much tastier than using simple soy sauce and really just takes your pot stickers to a whole new level. Just combine 3 tablespoons of soy sauce with 1 tablespoon rice vinegar and stir in 1 teaspoon of granulated sugar. Once the sugar's all dissolved, add half a teaspoon of toasted sesame oil and a couple shakes of crushed red pepper for a little extra kick. Once it's combined, I pour it over the sliced scallions I reserved earlier, and voila, my sauce is done! If you are planning on serving this to more than a couple of people, I strongly recommend doubling or even tripling the sauce recipe because it runs out real fast. Once 3 minutes are up, I can lift the lid from my pot stickers and allow any excess water to boil away. This step usually takes about 1 to 2 minutes. And with that, my pot stickers are done! Thanks so much for watching! I hope this tutorial shows that making dumplings from scratch isn't as intimidating as it sounds. Have you ever made pot stickers? Let me know in the comments below how it went or if you have any tips and tricks you'd like to share. And if you liked this video, consider hitting the subscribe and notifications button. That way you'll always know when I put out a new video. I really appreciate the support. Goodbye!